welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something pretty fundamental to getting along with others. Apologizing in English. It's way more than just a quick sorry. Mastering the subtle art of it can really smooth things out.
Yeah.
Whether you've bumped into someone on the street or maybe missed a big deadline at work.
Exactly. And our goal today really is to explore the ins and outs of saying sorry effectively.
Right.
We'll look at how apologies shift, depending on whether you're talking to a friend or maybe a colleague.
Okay.
How to respond when someone apologizes to you. And we'll even touch on some interesting cultural differences.
Ah, that sounds useful.
Think of this as your guide, sort of, to navigating those social moments with a bit more grace and confidence. We've been looking at a really insightful conversation from an English learning podcast that dives right into these real-world scenarios.
Okay, so let's jump right in then. Why even bother apologizing? I mean, it seems obvious you mess up, you say sorry, but is there more to it than just that?
Oh, there absolutely is, yeah. At its core, a good apology goes way beyond simply acknowledging a mistake.
Okay.
It's actually a vital tool for keeping our relationships healthy. Think about it.
Mm-hmm.
A sincere sorry can actually mend hurt feelings. It can dial down tension before it escalates.
Right.
And fundamentally show that you respect the other person's perspective and, well, their emotions. Over time, those thoughtful apologies really build a solid foundation of trust.
That makes total sense. It's like a social reset button almost.
Kinda, yeah.
Now, the material we looked at also highlighted that not all apologies are like one size fits all.
Exactly.
You wouldn't apologize the same way for accidentally spilling coffee on someone as you would for, say, forgetting a really important promise.
Precisely. And what's interesting is the sheer range of apologies we have in English. On one end, you've got those almost automatic little, oops, sorry, things when you brush past someone.
Yeah, I do that all the time.
Right. Those are usually for minor things. But then you have the more significant apologies, the ones needed when you've made a more serious error.
Like the birthday example.
Like forgetting a friend's birthday exactly as we saw in the source. These require more thought, a genuine expression of regret, and often, a bit more detail.
Right. Okay. So let's dive into those everyday casual apologies first. Our source had a great example of this, the forgotten coffee date. What happened there?
Yeah, that was a good one. The scenario involved two friends, Sarah and Mark, and Sarah had completely blanked on their planned coffee meetup.
Oops.
Yeah. When she remembered, she sent Mark a direct apology, something like, "Hey, Mark, I'm really sorry. I completely forgot about our coffee meetup yesterday."
Okay, straight up.
And Mark replied, "Oh, it's okay. I figured something came up. Maybe next time." It's a good illustration of how we tend to handle minor slip-ups with people we're close to.
And what makes that exchange work so well, do you think? What's the key there?
Well, a couple of things stand out, I think. First, Sarah immediately takes responsibility. She doesn't try to make excuses for forgetting. It's just a clear, I messed up.
No beating around the bush.
Exactly. And second, Mark's response is equally important in keeping the situation, casual. His, "it's okay," and the suggestion to reschedule, it shows understanding.
Right, it diffuses it.
It does. And it prevents it from becoming a bigger issue than it needs to be. It really reflects that forgiving nature we often have in close friendships.
Yeah, totally. And the source gave us some handy phrases for these kinds of moments, too. What were some of those go-to casual apologies?
Yeah, the source highlighted some really common ones. Things like, "my bad," which is super short and sweet.
Very casual.
Very casual. "Oops, sorry about that." Perfect for a minor mishap.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't mean to. Which you often use when you've unintentionally caused a small problem.
Right.
And maybe that was totally my fault, which clearly takes ownership, but in a sort of lighthearted way.
Got it.
These are all, really useful little phrases to have in your communication toolkit for those everyday things.
Okay, so those are the everyday stumbles, the casual stuff. Now, what about when the stakes are a bit higher? Like in a professional environment, how do apologies need to adapt there?
Ah, right. Well, in professional settings, apologies generally need to be more formal, and they need to demonstrate a greater sense of responsibility.
Makes sense.
Think about it. Your apologies in the workplace can really influence how colleagues and especially superiors perceive your reliability and your professionalism.
Yeah, definitely.
The source we looked at had that example of an employee missing a report deadline, which really highlights this difference quite well.
Okay, tell us about that scenario. What does the apology actually look like?
So the employee contacted their manager, Ms. Carter, and said something along the lines of, Hi, Miss Carter. I wanted to apologize for missing the report deadline.
Okay, direct again.
Direct, but more formal. They added, I had some unexpected delays, but I'll make sure it doesn't happen again. And Mrs. Carter responded with something like, I appreciate you acknowledging it. Let's discuss how to prevent this in the future.
Okay, so a very different feel from the forgotten coffee, right?
Totally different.
What are the key takeaways from that professional apology then?
Well, several things are important here. Firstly, the opening is clearly more formal. I wanted to apologize.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, while the employee mentions a reason, unexpected delays, the focus quickly shifts to taking responsibility
Right.
and, crucially, stating a commitment to preventing future issues. I'll make sure it doesn't happen again.
That shows accountability.
Exactly. Accountability and a proactive approach to the mistake. And Ms. Carter's response is also very professional. She acknowledges the apology, but immediately moves towards problem solving.
Yeah. Let's discuss how to prevent this.
Right. Which is pretty typical in a work context where, efficiency and meeting deadlines are really key.
Okay. And just like with the casual side, the source gave us some useful phrases for these more formal situations, too. What should we keep in mind for professional apologies?
Yeah, for formal apologies, the source pointed to phrases like, I sincerely apologize for, which just conveys a more serious level of regret.
Okay.
I take full responsibility, which leaves absolutely no doubt about who is accountable.
Important.
Very, let me make it right, bye. Which is great because it suggests a willingness to actually find a solution, not just say sorry.
Proactive.
Exactly. And I assure you it won't happen again, showing that commitment to learning and improvement. These phrases really signal professionalism and a serious approach to whatever the error was.
Okay, that's really helpful. So we've covered giving apologies in different situations, casual and formal.
Yeah.
But what about when you're on the receiving end? How do you respond when someone apologizes to you in English? Sometimes that can feel a little awkward, can it? If you're not sure what the best response is.
Oh, absolutely. That's a really important part of the whole equation, isn't it? Knowing how to respond gracefully is just as crucial for maintaining good communication.
Yeah.
So, for those minor, casual apologies we talked about, the source mentions some really common responses, things like, no worries.
Hear that all the time.
Very informal, very reassuring, it's fine, which is simple, direct way to accept. Or maybe, don't worry about it, which has a similar kind of easygoing tone to no worries.
Right, just lets it go.
Exactly. These help to quickly move past the issue without making a big deal out of it.
Okay. And what about when the apology is for something maybe a bit more significant? The source touched on that as well, didn't it?
Yes, it did. For more serious situations, a more thoughtful response is often appropriate. You don't want to just brush it off if it was actually hurtful or problematic.
Right.
So the source suggested phrases like, I appreciate your apology, which acknowledges the other person's effort and their sincerity.
Okay, that sounds good.
Or something like, thank you for acknowledging that, which kind of validates their recognition of the mistake and its impact. These responses show that you've heard them, you've accepted their apology, but without necessarily downplaying the initial issue, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it acknowledges the apology without saying the original thing was totally fine.
Precisely.
This is all super practical. Now, let's get into an area that I find really interesting. How apologies differ across cultures. What insights did our source material offer on this? Because that can be tricky.
Oh, this is where things can get really fascinating and, yeah, definitely tricky. The source highlighted a key point. How apologies are given and received can vary quite a bit depending on cultural norms.
Right.
For example, it mentioned that in some cultures, apologizing too frequently or for very small things might actually be seen as a sign of weakness or maybe even insincerity.
Oh, interesting. That's quite different.
It is. It contrasts quite sharply with many English-speaking cultures where, as you said earlier, we might apologize even for very small inconveniences, like accidentally bumping into someone or interrupting briefly.
That's such a good observation. I know I've definitely felt that impulse to say sorry almost automatically sometimes, even when it wasn't really my fault.
Exactly. And that's the point. What feels polite and completely natural in one cultural context might be perceived quite differently in another. The source really emphasized the importance of context and, well, cultural awareness. Understanding these underlying norms is just crucial for effective communication, especially when you're interacting with people from different backgrounds.
Yeah.
That kind of one-size-fits-all approach to apologizing, it just won't cut it when you cross cultural boundaries.
Okay, so Let's just recap quickly.
Yeah.
We've looked at why apologies are so important in the first place.
Relationship building, trust.